This is a video outlining exactly how we rebuilt Tino the GC's DM funnel, 122 cash collected in the first 75 days of us taking over the funnel. This was with zero paid ads, inbound only. Obviously, we looked at potentially doing outbound, but because of clients' preference and issues with the account, inbound only through many chats. So yeah, this is Tino the GC. This was one of the first clients I worked with. Now, this video is specifically breaking down his DM funnel as we scaled it. Now, obviously, we scaled him in general from 5K a month to 87K a month in 45 days. We also managed to repeat the same month, around 81K the next month afterwards, which we'll slightly touch on in this video as well. But this is just breaking down specifically what we did in his DM funnel to help him essentially, I think it was in like a 7x in terms of money we were bringing in from the last 75 days to the 75 days since. And yeah, this is his account. At the time, he had about 25,000 followers. And what we noticed straight away before we jumped in is he's got a very core following of people that are within his ICP and that we could sell to. He had very high trust because of his valuable content. Limited competition, we couldn't really find many that were people that were selling the same sort of thing of him. Construction, BizOp, essentially, was what he was selling. He was essentially selling how to start a construction company by only being the middleman, collecting the middle profits, getting the jobs, connecting the crews. We framed that as construction arbitrage. So everyone who would be watching from, regardless if you're in construction or coming from like sort of W-2 work, would understand how it all worked, as well as the content that we were building alongside of it. But yeah, his course had already been running for around 12 months. He had good deliverables and he had great testimonials. The only issue is that he just wasn't making that much money. And yeah, this was the most urgent issues we identified in the DMs. Poor conversions of leads, and the leads were limited despite lots of followers coming into the account. He had a poor sales team, specifically as well on the DM side. He had, and we'll touch on this, people who were setters, dialers, trying to DM set, two very, very different skill sets. And yeah, there was a lot of inconsistencies across the process. I put process in brackets because there wasn't really a process. That's why there was inconsistencies. Setters didn't know what to do. No one really knew what was going on. There wasn't really a core focus of how they were going to scale this thing. This is more context of what was it like the state of the offer before we jumped in. This is the last 75 before we took over the DMs. He had made 17K in cash collected. He had absolutely no metric. No one knew what was going on. As I said, conversations were awful. Leads were being burned. Pitch to early. You can see him saying all this in my testimonial that we recorded around a month ago. More specifically, he told me that the DM funnel couldn't make money. Now, I was also brought on to do basically every part of the setting funnel, including the call funnel, which they were focusing on. And he specifically told me the DM funnel could not make any money and that the other focus was essentially the webinars. And yeah, lead flow is non-existent. Getting Instagram followers, already sort of touched over that. But yeah, this made the offer owner feel like this offer was a problem. But looking at it from the outside straight away, you could tell straight away that it wasn't an offer issue. It was an issue within the sales process, typically the setting more than the closing, although the closing also improved as well. So yeah, this is May in more detail, and we took over around the 14th of May until the end of the month, and obviously they had 75 days since. Big things we introduced straight away, and there was a lot more. These are the biggest sort of levers we pulled. New type form. A lot of conversations were getting burnt when asking for money. This type form took away Tino trying to ask them for money in the DMs, where we could build enough urgency and enough trust to when they want to make a change, so when this question on the type form wouldn't really be a problem. We also found ways later to really understand a bit more about their financial situation as well. We created a new lead flow. Now, this was the easiest thing ever. He had hundreds of followers coming in, and obviously we were relying on inbound. Now, he was getting organic inbound, which showed how the content was definitely speaking to his ICP and was bringing a lot of interest. There was just no real invitation to speak to him. So straight away, what we did is we brought in this. Essentially, appreciate the follow. This is an automation, by the way. If you would like to speak to me, click Santino, and I'll show you how to build a subcontracting business, was exactly what the business model was. As soon as they press that, they got another automation, which would give them basically the idea straight away that whoever reaches back out will be Santino, because there would be a delay after this message. Obviously, the setters were on it as much as they can. If the setters did reply straight away, they would acknowledge how quick, Tino would acknowledge how quick he had replied to them, and you caught me at a good time, just to stop the idea that there was either an AI automation or someone else on his account. And we also we just slightly changed the automation. basically they had a press this button to get started, like this free thing to get started. But what it was doing, it wasn't bringing in people to the ManyChat. It was just getting lost where we couldn't actually contact them. So we brought in this get started, which essentially made them send us a message so that we could send the message in ManyChat. Now these were lower intent leads naturally, just because it was like a free thing, but this upped lead flow so much more. And we did make a lot of sales from this. The other thing we implemented was like a clear workflow. As I said, the setters were very disorganized. Firstly, we completely wiped out the complete setters, and we brought in people that are specific to DM setting at the start and obviously dialing as well. We had clear workflows. Essentially, how it works was you just work what's closest to the money. Very, very simple stuff, but setters tend to get very mixed up if they don't get clear direction, especially inexperienced ones or ones that haven't had managers before, like just working like from setter to offer owner. And we just brought in a labeling system, and this helped the data side of things as well, but it also helped with their workflow within ManyChat because they could clearly identify who was close to the money, who was close to the pipeline. Also made my workflow easy as well. And the other thing we did, and this was probably one of the biggest levers we pulled like over the whole thing, is we just brought in data, but not data specific to, like we've booked 5 calls and 3 have shown and 1 have closed. Like that's very like surface level data. We brought in new data, and you can see it, basically all of it here, specific to the DMs. So new conversations, ICP leads to help marketing, accounts touched, total conversations, new meaningful conversations, calls proposed, book calls. And with this, you could really identify the unique bottlenecks within the DM process that isn't just like we booked 5 calls, that was a good week, because someone could book 5 calls and have 20 conversations in that week, or they could have 10 conversations and book 3 calls. They're looking at it from like the data, the 10 conversations, 3 book calls, that would be from a setting side, a better week. Obviously, from a business side, maybe booking 5 more calls is better. But if you're looking to actually scale the business, you need to make sure your actual internal metrics and your conversion metrics are high so that when you scale, they stay that way. The initial outcomes from literally May the 15th and when we took over to the end of the month, we had 22 cash collected from the DMs, which was their record month in the DMs. I think it was 3x their record DMs ever they've done. The proof that changes were working became very apparent because we literally just installed this new system and it was working straight away, still with the same lead flow as well, only like a slight increased lead flow from the new things that we added in. People showing up more ready to buy just due to the questions that they were asking, the way we actually phrased in the sales call. And yeah, we increased in close rate, and we also increased in conversion. Now, obviously, the close rate was down to a new closer we actually brought in as well, but it was definitely impacted by the quality of the setting and the way we did things. Were June's biggest changes. We pushed for more organic content from the offer owner. He was doing around 10 hours a month for organic content for us. Now, that's all he had to do. Obviously, he sales fulfillment side, but after that, it was fully automated, the whole sales system, editing the videos, putting them out. That was all done for him. The only thing we can't replace is his face and his content and his ideas, even though we scripted a lot of the ideas for him alongside a growth op. And yeah, we track data from the content to show what worked and what didn't, because it's all good us posting more content and more people coming in and us booking more calls, but we need to identify what particular content was bringing in the most people so that we can then double down on that sort of content that's going to make us more money. And the other thing we did is we tightened up the post-booking process, which I'll show you in a lot more detail now. So yeah, this was June in a bit more detail, specifically focusing on the post-booking process. It's probably one of the biggest levers we pulled to up readiness to calls, show rates, education on what we actually did as well. And also what a lot of people in the setting process miss is the rapport base from the offer owner to the lead. Yeah, this was a post-booking process. We introduced a triage within the post-booking, but what we did, we made sure is that within this triage, we qualified them a bit more, got their time, made sure they were ready, made sure they were in the right environment, especially for this ICP. The ICP didn't know the difference sometimes between a call that is like a business call, the way you'd run it over Zoom, and a call that they would usually take in the field. It's like a usual work call to get a job, which would typically be over the phone, they could take in the field. We had to distinguish that there was a difference between the calls that they have in their normal job and the calls that we do, as I said, over Zoom. And we created group chats. Essentially what we created group chats for, and the triage system is that the setter who also set them would then ring them up to further qualify them, build them a bit more intent, make sure they were educated, and then move to a group chat with the closer, posed as in their favor. This group chat allowed us to educate them within them. It also allowed us to then meet the closer, and it also gave them, I guess, the responsibility of speaking to another human, because their only thing so far has been speaking to Tino, which also increases their likelihood to show up. Now, the other big thing we did to make them show up is we actually added a post-booking process specifically for them speaking to Tino. Now, and the way I like to put this is, imagine you speak to someone in the DMs and they end up pitching you on a call. As soon as then they go ghost after that call, after they pitch you the call, you know that their only idea and their only intent of that conversation was to get you on their sales call. Now, if after you pitch that sales call and it's seen as the natural next step, if you then start having a normal human conversation with them, it takes away the idea that Tino in this particular case is trying to directly sell to them, and that just based on the conversation they were having, that was something that he was offering, if that makes sense. And then we also used the triage to show that this obviously was a serious thing, that they were educated. But what this thing did as well is it just made them more accountable to showing up, and especially people were showing up. People will show up to the call because they like Tino and because they have that much of a good conversation with them in the DMs. They'll show up anyway. And this really worked. This up our show rate by about 15%, and then ended up opening it by about 20% the month afterwards. And it also made people, when they're on the call, already bought into the idea of working with Tino. Just the actual product needs to make sense, and obviously that's what the sales call is for. But obviously the closers on the call can't build more trust in Tino than Tino can do while speaking to them in the DMs. And especially, this is another thing we did, is we built out, after around 30 days of first taking over, a more in detailed script and frame of how we can actually speak to these people to increase their readiness and show the call, and to make sure they're actually qualified. This is an example of an in-depth one we did. Now it is a bit longer, but this was basically an in-depth way of how we can control the conversations to make sure that they're qualified, they are ready, that we're asking them the right things without people missing. Now, this obviously is a frame, not a script. The problem with scripts is that conversations are a naturally flowing thing. So the idea behind this was just to make sure we were taking them in the right steps to run the right frame, and that we had control over the conversation. Because if you have control over the conversation, whether that's on the dials or in the DMs, you have control of where you can take it. And if you know the certain information that you're trying to get, you can make sure you ask questions in a certain way that's going to get that information without causing resistance to the lead. And we did this also with the DMs as well. We found out many people's pain points, what we were selling on them, the general sort of goals that they had, and we made sure that we covered all bases with an idea of where conversations usually go. Now, obviously, there were instances where conversations go somewhere else, but in general, this SOP massively helped us boost conversion and, once again, keep the frame in the DMs to actually get them on that call initially. The thing we did as well, and this obviously was helped by the marketing side of things, but it was also pushed by the sales team, is we created a 20-minute video from Tino, basically explaining the whole business model in 20 minutes, that we would send post-booking to help educate them a lot more than it would be a setter on the phone talking to them or trying to explain it over text. This 20-minute video, we found if people watched it, every single person would understand the business model, understand why it was good. It also helped stop a lot of ejections before the call, helped us build a bit more intent as well to the call, and was really a great asset in helping boost efficiency. But yeah, this was the June outcome. We ended up doing 52K cash collected. This was new cash collected, not revenue, specifically from the DMs. We had real proof that the funnel was actually working, and that lead flow was beginning to increase as well with the content, and that the content we were putting out was actually attracting the people that we could sell to. And we also had a solid data set going into next month that we could work off. We had the base metrics of 30 days of things really in place. As we said, these were new setters. These setters were only on the offer by the end of June for 45 days, which is basically like sort of when they're fully ramped and really ready to go. I would say around the 30-day mark is when they're really autonomous, and then it is just a case of like really changing micro things to make them better. And actually that is where you see the biggest change in conversion, when you really shift this sort of micro stuff at this sort of area. At this point, I think we were converting at around an 8 to 10% new convo to put call rate. And from this data set, as you'll see when we go in, we managed to change a few things, and 1 or 2 changes really changed the whole conversion. But this was only done through the data that we had collected in the last 45 days. Without that, we wouldn't have been able to make these decisions to actually increase conversion. And yeah, this got us to the start of July now. These are the July biggest changes. As I mentioned before, we changed the order of conversations to up our conversion rate. Now, this basically doubled our conversion rate, which I'll go in a bit more detail in a second. And this was from introducing a new SOP based on the ICP in the last 45 days, which I briefly touched on before with the sort of charts, but this will change a little bit more. But an issue that we face, and obviously like we cannot rely on like lead flow to always be perfect, but lead flow did drop off 40%. Which I always make the point of, you can't always rely on the offer to be pumping in leads when you're not getting out the most of the leads that are already in your funnel. And you'll see from this that we managed to keep the same amount of cash for the month, but with 40% lead flow, which is on a setting side, a really, really good thing to have. And that meant that when we got to a point where lead flow went back up to where we wanted it, we could then basically go off the data and know that now we get to this point again, we can make actually like a lot more money. And yeah, this is July in more detail. Now, this was my favorite month in terms of like the actual management side and actually helping grow the offer or grow the funnel or make the funnel more consistent and better converting. And yeah, these are the two biggest things that we change. Obviously, data improvements, I'll show this in a bit more detail. But in terms of call expectations, I know we mentioned that we had the type form that we sent out. We actually added questions to the type form of what is the main thing you're hoping to learn or solve by coming on this call, just to get us a better idea of what they actually wanted from the call. This would also be covered in the triage as well. But another massive one that we did, and I know I mentioned the problem that we had of people taking these calls on at the site. Now, what we actually found is when we doubled down on the call expectations, people were then rescheduling because even though they were agreeing to the call expectations, when they initially booked a time, they didn't know. So they booked a time that can't suit them. And when you start rescheduling people, it becomes a lot more awkward to get them on a call. So to sort of pre-frame that, all we did was add this question: will you be in a quiet environment prepared to get the most out of your 45-minute call? And this made sure that every single person that booked on a call knew that this was the expectation for the call, so that they picked a time that was good for them. And yeah, this resulted actually in one person, or maybe two, actually end up taking the call in the wrong environment, and having to reschedule because of it. Which was great. It meant that obviously what we were doing was working. Such a small change to something so insignificant allowed us to be much more efficient with reschedules and stuff, although it was a specific issue with this ICP that we did manage to fix over time. And yeah, we had data improvement, and this was the bit I'm most proud of, is that these were our sort of metrics by the end of the month. Now, in my opinion, this could even have been higher. There were improvements that we can still make. But in general, we had almost a 70% convo to book call. And that's just anyone that came into the funnel. There was almost a 1 in 5 chance that they'd be booked onto a call. Once they booked onto a call, there'd almost be an 80% chance that they would actually show up to their call, regardless of if they had to reschedule. They would still show up to that call, which means you're having the right intent. And from that, people that show to a call, 30% of them, or almost 30% end up closing. And in theory now, we know that if we were to improve the lead flow and keep these metrics, we can make a lot more money, which was a great thing long term, because now we know not only does the funnel work, but our conversion within the funnel is getting better. And even like looking at this now, these can still be converted, and these can still go a lot higher. I've seen instances where like you can hit months between like that 20 to 30 range quite easily, as long as the marketing's right, but also the setting side is right as well. As long as there's like congruency between the whole thing, there's no reason why this couldn't be higher. But this was a great conversion compared to last month, where we were at that sort of 9% mark, 8% mark. And yeah, it was a good month in general. Obviously, the lead flow actually negatively impacted us, but in general, a very, very great month. And yeah, this was our July outcome. 48K new cash collected, not revenue again. Literally, basically every metric stayed the same. I think our close rate slightly went up, besides literally one. Our conversation to book call went up by around 80% of the last month. So all we did was change that metric, and it allowed us to keep the same cash flow, but with 40% less volume, which was a very, very great month. And yeah, this is basically the whole 75 days of when we took over the funnel. And yeah, here is a recap. So this was done all organically. The offer owner, Tino, the GC, he was only doing 10 hours a month of content in the month of June and July. Everything else was taken care of. We improved the sales teams. We actually brought in the systems, not even improved them. We brought in a completely new systems, improved the lead efficiency. We improved, obviously, the lead quality as well through the data we were collecting back to the marketing. And in total, we made Tino, the GC, 122K in 75 days just from this funnel. there was more funnels that were going on and that managed to making more money. But for just from his DMs, just from literally Instagram DMs, nothing else, we made $122,000 cash collected. There's some people with payment plans that will pay them over as well, and that was a 7.17 increase in the last 75 days. Which, yeah, it was a great achievement. It was great to do. There's a lot of levers we pulled, which I covered in this video. So yeah, if you are an offer owner who feels like you could be making more money from the attention you already have, and you have or are starting an offer that you know already gives people results or that will give you results, DM me the word convert on Instagram at NortonCollins21, and I'll show you in a lot more detail how exactly I can help. Nice one.